Hi, and welcome to this presentation on business process mapping and improvement. Um, I've used the word projects here, and it's a little bit of a misnomer because a lot of what I'll be talking about today will be applicable to projects, but also to a permanent function within an organization who are tasked with the capture and ongoing improvement of business processes, corporate-wide business process management framework. But processes, by their essence, capture what people do. You know, what are the steps that you do? Who are you? What are the inputs you need? What are the outputs that you produce? How does it flow? How do we track the timeline of flow? What kind of documents are produced or products? Or do you deliver a service, right? And what kind of focus do you have? And how do you design this whole thing, right? So a lot of process mapping is about culture, and a lot of it is about people looking in introspectively and from without, looking at who their stakeholders are, how things flow. An extremely beneficial exercise, really, within every organization, and irrespective of which level you're in, irrespective of whether you're working in sales, or you're working in human resources, or you're working in R&D, there's value for you in terms of capturing, understanding, articulating, documenting, and having an established framework for your processes. Within this presentation, I won't be looking at because some of the organizations I've been with, they look at capturing of processes as a framework overall. You know, it's an organization that would look at the innovation and R&D processes. They've got on the opposite end, they've got customer-facing processes, and in the middle you've got engineering and logistics. You've got manufacturing, right? You've got support functions of audit. You've got human resource, finance, IT. So I'm not really going to be looking at it from that kind of organization functional perspective. I'll be looking at it more from a customer journey perspective. And both of them are valid, and both of them are required within organizations. However, just to set a context of the discussion that I'll be covering during this presentation. So one of the important questions that we need to look at is, what's our strategy? Meaning, not our strategy within the process management effort of work, but overall, as an organization. Am I a telecom operator, or am I a hospital? Am I a university, or am I a chain of restaurants? Right? What are my business drivers? Where do I need to focus? What's most important to me? What's most valuable? What's my raison d'etre? I want to understand what kind of constraints, because if I'm going to, a lot of process-oriented work is about organizational change, culture change, people change, and I want to understand what kind of constraints are there. What kind of issues or risks? Is it how is the culture? What kind of roadblocks might I face? Has this effort been? Is a project that I'm working on the third or fourth time that the organization is trying to implement it? Why didn't it succeed last time, or the times before? Or perhaps it's been there for many years, but management want to inject some fresh impetus into this effort, and I could be the one who's tasked with taking that up and raising this and taking it forward. So what will I need to focus on? The third bullet talks about our customers, and that's of course a subset of a wider stakeholder management analysis that needs to be done. But who exactly are the parties that give revenue? Where does the money come from? And what are the channels? What are the touch points? Even before they become a customer, they're a prospect. And what are the touch points throughout the entire relationship that I have with them? And the scope of my work referring to, whether I'm a consultant, whether I'm an incumbent within that function, and that helps me to gear and understand exactly why I'm there and make sure that I'm focused on driving the project or that effort in the right way. Looking at the wider stakeholders, then too many cooks spoil the broth. So ultimately there will always be one single point of contact or SPOC. But I still need to know who the project management parties are on my side. Does the client have a PMO that need reporting? Who's the project sponsor? Who are the other parties involved? What expectations do they have? What would they like to see from the effort that I'm going to carry out for them on their behalf and to serve their interests and needs and requirements? I would say that a lot of organizations or a lot of projects leave communication as a sort of in a kind of a wholesale kind of approach. My recommendation is that from even the second or third week of a project, there should be weekly, disciplined reporting to the right stakeholders. So every week that passes by of your project, you see yourself taking that steady step on a consistent basis to the agreed targets or KPIs or the deliverables or the outcomes that are in that initial business case. We want to understand the technologies that are involved. Depending on the nature of the project, many projects that I'll see are actually only focused on looking at the as-is. Because the organization has never actually done that in a cohesive and in a complete manner across the board. And so the value of just literally and just understanding and articulating and documenting, capturing and understanding, where we are today and what exactly our people are doing, in of itself has incredible value to organizations. That's really the core and the baseline of what process improvement's about. It's about mapping what you have today. That can include identifying gaps as well, opportunities for improvement. It can, for sure, because you can hit two birds with one stone, because when you're out there capturing information, doing the workshops, meeting parties on the ground, you are going to pick up as a process analyst, as a process consultant, as a process manager, you're going to be picking up a whole wealth of information that initially has been, kind of spread out or in people's heads. People are frustrated. They want somebody to talk to and tell about what they do and why they're having certain hardships. And you're the party that come and knock on their door and say, hey, I'm here to understand your processes and hopefully drive some improvement to help you deliver your work better. I'm here to help you. And so I need you to help me. And here we go. Here's our workshop. Here's our meeting. Here's the interview. I'm going to work shadow you and see how you do your work. How do you interact with the customer? How do you use this application? Are you taking 30 minutes to service the customer because you've got to fill out 11 screens there and you're just clicking your mouse between these things? When your colleague comes in the next shift after you, and the customer contacts them, do they have to tell them everything again because you don't have a way to document what you're doing properly into the tool? And even if you did, your colleague doesn't understand what you've written. We kind of get in process management, you're looking at it from the top level, but you get involved all the way down. And the kind of improvement and enhancement efforts that you bring out, they affect the top line, they affect the bottom line of what the organization does. We need to understand those tools, even if we're not going to replace them, even if we're not going to retire any of them, we still need to know what they are and exactly what's happening and how that's being done. Is there a document management system? Is there some kind of system that takes records of customers or of patients in the hospital, for instance? Are there multiple systems that don't talk to each other, right? What kind of data is being captured in each of these? How does it flow? We need to understand the history and the background and the context of our effort within the organization, and we need to put together, ultimately be always thinking with the end in mind, that early on within the engagement, within the effort, is we should have some kind of plan. Over the next 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 3 months, whatever it is, at least at a weekly level, okay? What are the key things that I want to do? This thing is going to take about 6 weeks. This is going to take about 3 weeks. That kind of planning is very, very important, right? We might change some of it because in the beginning, we at an early stage of the project, we may not even have all of the documents. We may not have a lot of the information, even though we may have a very good SPOC to work with. Once we're out there on the ground, capturing information, we realized that there were things that we didn't know when we put that initial plan together. Start with my recommendation is always to start in these kind of projects with the overall customer journey, right? Think of it as phases. If you're a telecom provider, for example, right, then before people become your customer, they might just be showing an interest, right? What are the channels that they're using? Are they using an app or a website? Are they walking into shops that, if I'm a telecom provider, I've got across the country, right? I've got, are they, do we provide SIMs that are available in petrol stations, for example, right? So a customer could pick a SIM card from a supermarket or a petrol station, but it doesn't work yet, right? So how am I going to be acquiring new business, right? Do I have corporate customers, B2B, and as well as consumers? And what's my strategy for the two of them, right? That's something that went into the initial planning effort. But in that customer journey, think of it along the left-hand side, right? You have the touch points of the customer of the prospect before they become your customer. And we want to be looking at those touch points and making sure that we understand them, right? So now we have let's say we have a customer journey, at least with the phases, right? So we have a prospect, we have a customer who's with us, and then we have somebody who actually wants to leave us, has left us, and then we want to have a phase of kind of trying to attract them back, even people who've left, okay? Within then each of those phases, come up with a process list. And at this stage, the process list needs to be fairly extensive. Think about all of the processes at the different levels, the customer-facing processes, the internal processes that are within the organization, finance, HR, right? At this stage, it's brainstorming, working to just come up with a raw list of complete processes. One organization I worked with, we captured an initial list of over 500 finance processes, right? What did we end up with? About 25 or 30. So bear in mind that initial list that you're coming up with is literally just a raw brainstorm, looking at current documents, seeing what's on the ground, seeing what predecessors before you came on board had developed and documented, right? And you come up with really kind of the next stage is to come up with a way of communicating this. So you really want to have a standard template for how you're going to present this information. There are certain tools on the market that are available, in which case the tool will drive this part for you. And all you've got to do is make sure that you're plugging the right information in the right place. But the kind of key important things that you want to have in a process map, okay? So might be a process map, say in the hospital. You've got somebody, coming in, let's say, to see the doctor, right? They're not feeling well. What are the key activities that take place from the time they turn up on the reception desk, right? And the customer says, okay, I want to see a doctor. Where do I go? They say, okay, the GP's section is on the second floor in the east wing. The lift or the elevator is over there, and they go down to the right place, and they give they identify themselves, giving a mobile number or the postcode of their home. If they remember their patient ID number, their record is pulled up, and they're given an appointment. They sit and wait for their turn. They go see the doctor. They might need some referrals. They may not. They may need to come back. They're given a prescription if required, and the patient medical record is updated, and so on. So there's certain activities that take place, and information flows. There's certain things that the patient needs to do. There's certain things that the doctor needs to do, or a nurse, or one of the other staff, or maybe the pharmacist would need to enter any medication that's prescribed, or any additional things that the customer might need into the system, and the whole kind of that kind of trip to the hospital can be captured as a flow of activities using usually the verb noun notation, right? So sort of ask customer of symptoms, right? So the doctor, the very first thing is the customer sitting there, and they ask them, how can I help you today? What's wrong? Are you not feeling too well, or what's the purpose of your visit here today? Tell me. So we say, capture that into a rectangular action box into the process flow, and that becomes a documented process flow. Bear in mind that when this is happening, a lot of process work is about the people and making sure they have the right skills for what they're there to do. So a lot of being a doctor is not actually telling your customer that this is the kind of medication you need, or I recommend you to I recommend you XYZ, but it's about having good communication skills, showing them that you care, showing them that you are paying attention to them in terms of what their requirement is, what pain they might be going through, and then in in a smart way, in a customer focused way, to make sure that you're communicating effectively that feeling to them. So that even though they're a patient, they're a customer of the hospital, and they feel that they're getting a good service. It's important to put together that template, and I use Microsoft Visio for the vast majority of my projects. It's a wonderful tool for capturing processes at all the levels, the top level, the further level down. And it's important to put together some kind of template and get that signed off from your process stakeholder, right? We go down to little, rudimentary details, such as, what font do you need to have? Should it be Arial 12, and should it be a thick line or a thin line with the arrow, and so on? One organization I worked with, we I worked with consultants who came who were providing us advisory services, and they came out with their template, and it was like 35, 40 symbols, and I persuaded them to cut it down to about 5 or 6, maximum 7 symbols. So I told them that, look, once we've moved on, we're all working here as on a project basis, but our customer would not get value from 30 plus different kinds of connectors, and each one means something else. They're not going to get value from that. Let's simplify it for now, and we can add complexity afterwards when there's a reason, when there's a benefit for it. Even though the symbols that you have are amazing, I think they're extremely beneficial, but not for this customer at this time. Let and that idea was accepted, and we move forwards with that. Once you've done, um, once you've captured, a list of processes, and you've got the template ready, you might want to also think about. It's very, very important to think about a sort of complete end-to-end flow, right? A sort of like a classical order to cash flow, right? What are all the processes that are involved that grow across the multiple functions of the organization, right? And it might be difficult to do that in the beginning, but it's still an extremely valuable exercise that needs to be done. Once you're ready, the next step is to actually start the workshops. And this is where the project really gets very, very interesting. I've been in projects where I'm sitting with a stakeholder, and it's actually incredible how much information they give me, even within a couple of hours. Even if it's just a 2 hour meeting, I get an incredible amount of understanding. I come in with my experience, I come in with my understanding, and I've got all the right questions to ask, but I don't really know, and it's often surprising what happens within organizations, and the number of issues and gaps and risks that one identifies within the organization. Remember earlier in the presentation we were talking about the strategy and how we should be focused on that. We're not going to be able to take, we might identify 1,000, 2,000 improvements, right? There's no way, and it doesn't make any sense to, um, spin off improvement initiatives across all of them, and and nobody would expect that. However, as a minimum, what's most valuable is at least we're noting everything down, because that's something that even after the project is over will remain as very extremely valuable reference, an extremely valuable reference for the organization to then pick up on this and in a structured, progressive way continue to improve on some of these risks and gaps. Once the workshop has been completed, we're back to our computers, and and basically that kind of laborious effort of documenting everything down in whichever agreed template or system was agreed. Once the documentation is done, we get the sign-offs from the process owner. So the process owner is a role who will own a process end to end. You have a process owner for your finance processes, a process owner for IT, right? You can, where you're working within a function, have individual process owners within that. Okay, you might have for accounting processes, you might have in finance a process owner who only cover accounting. You might have another one who will only cover budgeting, for example. Even if you're not going to be, I'm just coming to the last point here on the slide. Even if you're not going to be, looking extensively at the to-be processes, right? You still, when you're doing the as-is, you can devote 10, 20, 30% of your time to capturing improvements, an extremely valuable exercise. So that If the 2B is going to be a separate project, you've actually given them a lot of extremely beneficial information. Awareness is, I mentioned about how communication should be on a weekly basis. So awareness will come into play as part of that weekly kind of reporting that you're doing to your stakeholders. And once these processes are documented, they need to be shared out. They need to be sent to people in a readable, presentable format, and keeping people on the ball in the flow of what you're doing and the outputs you're producing. As we move towards the closure of a project, think about who will take over after you've left. Okay, and make sure that all of the documentation is up to date, all the reports are done, you've got a sensible filing structure. It might be in Microsoft SharePoint or whichever system the client's using. You might have to update the business case with what the deliverables were and how you fared during execution. And you may or may not have role assignment. Some of the projects I work on, the organization was simply looking to gain a deeper understanding of what they were doing. And they didn't really have somebody to kind of take on that role, in which case you wouldn't have a handover. And another project I worked for, then I had process owners coming in, and sometimes it was across entire teams. So I would have to do a knowledge transfer on a team-by-team basis, and at other times it would be one process owner where I've got to make sure that they really understand what they're doing. And when I'm talking to them, I'm giving them the entire history. Hey, you know, when I met that person in the organization, this is what they were talking about. Yes, some of that is in the meeting minutes, but I didn't write down every single line and every word that they told me. And I'll give them personal recommendations as well, that when you're dealing with this party, make sure you take care of this part, and so on. Because I want that person whom I'm handing over to be successful in their role. And my job is to give them 101%. In the handover and the closure, make sure that you are highlighting what could be future initiatives, because the quality is an ongoing thing, and improvement and enhancement is a strategic value add that every astute organization invests in and wants to keep reinvesting in. And you can only move an organization in reality forward in a step-by-step fashion. Okay? Human beings are interesting, and they rarely take a huge step forward in a very tangible way. Even in transformation projects, you take a large step forward, and then it takes time for everybody to get used to that new way of working and the new system, the new processes, and the new responsibilities that are due upon them. I hope this presentation was beneficial. As I said, I didn't really, it isn't intended to be comprehensive in its nature at all. I simply put together some quick bullet points and some key points that I believe are beneficial and that answer many of the questions that I get faced with when I'm out there. My email is here, mail@musab.co.uk. Please do drop me a message with any feedback, any questions, any follow-ups, and if your organization needs help with mapping their processes or improving them, then just reach out and we can have a discussion on that. Thank you very much and wish you all the best. Take care.